Hello, my name is Carlos Alvarado. I'm the chairman of domestic and international programs of the Parapsychology Foundation. Today is October 8th, 2002, and we are at the Eileen Garrett Library of the Foundation in New York City, talking with the executive director of the Foundation, Lisette Coly. We will be asking her about her involvement in the field. So let's start the interview and ask Lisette, could you tell us your position here at the Foundation and the things that you do?
Well, I'm the executive director, but that I rose to that position in 1998. Prior to that, I had been at the Foundation since 1969. I had worked part-time and taken a sabbatical from college and had worked full-time at the Foundation in 1969. Garrett was in ill health, my maternal grandmother, and I wasn't too impressed with my college studies, and I went to a business school for secretarial skills. And working at the Foundation proved helpful to my mother, Mrs. Coly, at this period of transition with Garrett's ill health. I could get valuable business experience working as a secretary. And what it did for me was to throw me back into school full-time because I realized I didn't really like working. So I did go back to college and finished up my degree at Hunter College here in the city, a BA. I finally finished with a degree in French literature, which isn't too helpful in parapsychology. I had intended to major in psychology, and I'm sorry to say that statistics sank me. So I jumped ship and wound up in a degree in French literature with a minor in psychology. But to get back to the Foundation, I started working in '69, and I was low man on the totem pole. I was working the mail room. I was working on the reception on an old PBX board, rather like Lily Tomlin, or whatever. And I just was the gopher, pretty much. When I finished school, I resumed working at the Foundation, and I got into the publishing end of things as a copy assistant, a proofreader, things like that, junior editor type thing, and continued within publications. Then as my stature in the field grew, I started becoming the conference coordinator, because the Foundation used to do these international conferences. So it was my job to tend to scope out possible topics and possible conference participants for consideration by the board, and then finding the spaces to the locales for these conferences. In 1976, I became vice president of Parapsychology Foundation, and I have worked closely with our president, Mrs. Coly, up until 1998, when she certainly paid her dues. I took over the day-to-day administrative work, but of course she still is the president, and I'm still number two trying hard.
So you will say that you came to work in the Foundation because it was part of your family tradition? Or do you have any particular interest in the field itself, or any other reason?
I would say, to be quite truthful, it was the family obligation, coupled with giving me a possibility to hone my business skills. Garrett, however, had made it quite clear that I should go in a business mode. And in fact, because I had spent summers traveling with her in my teen years, I was very, very lucky to spend summers in the south of France and traveling with her to Switzerland, different conferences. And she felt that I would be well suited for, now don't laugh, a career in the diplomatic service. And of course, because I had had my head turned by Garrett and all this European travel, that was really what I wanted to do. And as such, in '69, at this strange period in time with Garrett's ill health and the Foundation's transition, I was always just going to be working here in 6 months. I was always leaving. I was always leaving, and it was just going to be a temporary thing. Slowly, I realized that the foundation afforded me all sorts of opportunities in that there was publishing to be involved with, there was travel, there was merchandising with publications and things like that. And of course the people, the library, and I like people and I like the personal touch. So at that point, all those factors in the foundation were appealing, but I would say that my preliminary questions about Garett, what she did, which I sort of took at face value growing up with it, as I continued to work at the foundation, I was sort of suckered in to the phenomena and to the field in general.
Yeah. Going back to Garett, it's interesting the comments that you made. When did you first were aware of Garett's reputation in psychical research and that she was a well-known psychic and medium?
Well, I think I had an impression earlier that she was something, and I think people would agree that she in fact was something. Very flamboyant person and very theatrical looking. And I had a sense early on at the age of, I would say probably 8 or 9, that this was not a grandmother not like everybody else who grandmothers made pies and you went to Thanksgiving dinner with a little gray-haired lady. So this was strange that this very flamboyant person would come. In those days, Garett had Garett Publications in addition to Parapsychology Foundation because she was a very entrepreneurial personality and a businesswoman aside from her psychic functioning. So there were cocktail parties, big receptions at the family home out in Westchester. So as a little girl, I was again trotted out as the party piece in my little pinafore for a few moments. And so I had this sense of Garett being in a circle of all these people, center of attention, and I like that. So I knew she was something, but I had no idea what until probably, I think I was about 14. In fact, I'm sure I was in 8th grade for sure, because I had very quickly copped onto the idea that you could do science projects and term papers about psychical research or parapsychology, and nobody knew what that was. And that was an easy thing for me to pop into the office or grab a couple of Garett's books and do my what is parapsychology. I wrote this paper in 8th grade science, handed it in, and when I got the grade back, which of course was an A, which when you have all the materials, it's an easy stretch, the teacher came to my desk, and you'll appreciate that adolescents very much want to fit in, right? I mean, you want to be one of the group. It's a precarious time in one's life. And the teacher, in front of everybody, said, "Oh, I loved your paper, and your grandmother is Eileen Garrett. That is so wonderful. Could she come to address the class? And I've read all her books." And he went on and on and on. And I flew home when school broke and went in high dudgeon to my mother, and I said, "Oh my God, Mr. Nickel," I'll remember, "he wants her to come. He's going to call. Tell her not to come. Please, please do not have her come." And I was really appalled, because in trying to fit in, who had this psychic grandmother? And on top of that, if they ever got a look at her with her turban and very long earrings and swaddled in furs, what was that? So that was at the moment that I realized that I would have to be careful when talking about Garett within parapsychological terms, that indeed she was in wider circles than I had been led to believe.
Yeah. Did you ever see Garett perform as a medium?
Well, Garett, not as a trance medium per se, in that there would always be, and I'm talking as a youth now, people visiting at the house, and she would have little tete-a-tetes with them, not in trance, but in doing therapeutic. She used to work a lot with psychiatric patients, sort of healing, or that very strong empathic psychic impressions. She would do some work that way. So I would see glimpses of, say, psychic functioning, she would have bits and pieces of information, but she made it a concerted, not a rule per se, but she kept her psychic self apart from the family. When in the family circle, she was not the trance medium by any means. And in fact, as an adolescent, she cautioned me and my girlfriends, finding a Ouija board in the house, and she went ballistic, saying that, girls, you don't play with things you don't understand. You do not open doors that you're not strong enough or capable enough to walk through. So she did not want to instruct anyone. She wasn't out to prove the existence of her psychic abilities.
Yeah.
So for the family, she kept that aside. However, I am a bad girl in that I guess I would have been about 19. I was in the south of France with her at her villa, and Ben Webster, who was the organizer, I think of the New Horizons organization in Canada, who funded the George Owen. He was the money behind the throne or whatever over there. He had come to one of Garett's conferences, one of the PF conferences, stayed behind, and he'd asked for a private sitting. After a lovely lunch, I was dismissed, to my own recognizance, as it were, and there was a lovely grape arbor outside in the garden, and that was one of Garett's favorite haunts. Loved flowers, so she's encircled in this little patio thing. And I knew that the seance, that she was going to go into trance for Webster. So I crept up to the second floor bedroom, and there was a porch overlooking this thing. And I remember crawling around like a commando, and literally like Kilroy, that World War II figure, of trying to get over the side of the thing to look, to hear, but without being disturbed. Mm-hmm. So I was very proud of myself, and ethically it's not too nice, because a reading, as it were, is a personal thing, and we were always taught to respect that. So it's almost like eavesdropping on on somebody's personal thing. Well, that didn't disturb me. And what happened, what I saw, scared the pants out of me, because Garett had been talking. She, as most trance mediums do, the breathing changed. The head dropped to her chin, and after a few moments of deep breathing, very slowly the head came up, and out of her mouth, and she said Uvani was her control, her primary control, the gatekeeper, and in a totally different voice and accent. Here Uvani's talking, and I'm like, talk about drop jaw, like, huh? And I must have listened to this for about 5 minutes or so. He then went on from Uvani. You would speak to Uvani, and then you would plead your case as to what you wanted to do. And I think Abdul Latif, the physician, appeared, and I must have listened, and again with a total change of voice, and I just could not get my head around the fact that was Garett doing that. How did she do that? So much so that I only listened, chicken heart that I am, I only listened for probably another 5 minutes, and then I ran inside. Mm-hmm. So that was the full extent of me seeing Garett in trance.
I see. Well, still, it's a very interesting observation that must have affected you.
Very strongly, very strongly. Yeah. I have quite a residual, not love-hate, but a real fear of psi, as a lot of people do. I think and yet I'm very, very, I find myself with age becoming more and more attracted to it. Mm. And I think probably it was because who has access to such a strongly psychic person that, yes, I was titillated, I was interested, but I was also frightened, because Garett would always say, oh, don't worry, darling, it will come. And that frightened me. So it's only with age now that I'm about ready to say, oh, yeah? Well, I'm ready. But I don't know. I still sleep with a nightlight on.
Yeah. Well, let me change the topic and ask you about your work here at the foundation. The foundation, as I understand it, has been basically almost under 3 administrations. No, first it was Garett, then Mrs. Coly, which still is here, and now
Bringing up the rear.
yes, and now you. The question I will ask is, how do you see yourself in comparison to your mother and your grandmother in terms of your philosophy, your personal style, your goals for the foundation? Do you see similarities or differences?
Well, I would say that, first off, the foundation was never envisioned to be a family affair. Rather, as Mrs. Coly said, who else at Garett's death was going to feel for the organization and take on this job, which is not well paying, it's unsung, working in the trenches? Who would have that emotional feel for the organization? So, as I said, when I started working at the foundation, I was always checking out. I was always leaving. So there was never a firm commitment until I started thinking, oh, well, this is interesting. From my first, and I've worked now at the foundation since '69, so that's, I guess, over 30 years or so? Oh, my God. But in any case, I never really saw myself as taking it over, as becoming this third in the triumvirate, as it were. But at the same time, I realized I like to think that Garett was this very flamboyant personality. She was the catalyst. You could not compare to stir up that pot to get everybody excited. She was the draw, and yet she had such intelligence and literary capabilities to express what she does. I mean, just a phenomenal, phenomenal person. And yet, you needed, following this tornado of creativity, or this strange personage that you're probably wondering what I'm describing, you needed Mrs. Coly to come in, someone extremely practical, because creative tornadoes are wonderful to behold and to be around, but they're a mess to clean up after. And my mother, Eileen Coly, is nothing but particularly practical. So how she led the foundation is, after its first burst of glory, is really to create the body of work through the years and the sterling reputation. The fact that people would be given an opportunity to express or do any particular work as long as it was a viable proposal. The conferences, the publications, and yet there was a rigidity and a form to the organization with just nuts and bolts housekeeping, like grant forms and being accountable for the grantees and things like that. In Garett's day, you could shoot for the hip. The IRS wasn't looking over nonprofit.
Times.
Yes, if you had told Eileen Garrett she couldn't have sent, say, Stevenson to India, she would have had a fit. Mrs. Coly had to comply with all kinds of regulations, especially I think in 1972 when the IRS codes came into effect. So, as I never aspired to the foundation or to its leadership, it comes with time and maturity. I was able to have my children, even though I'm a late bloomer, but Mrs. Coly was firmly behind the desk. I could take some maternity leave, do my maternal nurturing, and therefore at this time of my life, now that they're teenagers or whatever, I was really up to the task. And I realized, since we're all very different personalities, that my strengths, building on the two ladies, I'm somewhat of a amalgamation of the two. By no means am I psychic. I'm not totally flamboyant, but yeah, I'm a little showy. I'm extroverted. I can be enthusiastic, and yet I am my mother's daughter as well, in that she always harkens back to discipline and responsibility. So those administrative skills that were inculcated with serving my apprenticeship with the two ladies have served me in good stead. So now we have the excitement of Garett, the practicality and the volume of work. I can draw on that, and what I must do at this point in time is get the word out about the foundation, because we're a wonderful resource and people just do not know that we exist. So really I see my role is getting the word out.
Yes. Yeah, I think I will agree with a lot of what you are saying, that I see you are a good combination of both Garrett and Mrs. Coly, you know, in the sense of having all the best qualities and putting them
Well,
all
some
in-
of the worst too, but I know it's difficult as an
Well,
employee
we don't need to
to
get
mention
into-
that. To mention that.
But all those things are very important to keep a foundation going, you know, the discipline and the creativity on one hand or the other. Let me ask you, I wonder, I know people that come here are always curious about the family and curious about our director. One of the things that they ask, and I have been asked more than once, is, does Lisette have psychic abilities? Did she inherited, you know, the gifts of her grandmother? How will you answer that?
Well, first, I do find it interesting because, of course, my mother's been asked that, I myself, and I find a real need for people, they really want to believe that it's been passed on. And even though I tell them, and I will tell you that, no, I don't consider myself a psychic, and certainly you can be a painter but not a Michelangelo, so an Eileen Garrett is not going to come along very often. What I am is, and again, I think a lot of people who are people who really interact with people. I think I'm highly intuitive. You know, I go with my gut. I had some experiences, remember when I said that I was frightened as a child, I had some experiences, as most children do, which then tend to slough off with maturation. Prophetic dreams about the death of a grandfather, a family friend. I was staying with the widow at the time. I was 13. He appeared in the bedroom. I was sleeping in his bedroom next to the widow. He had died while I was at summer school. He came to sit on the edge of the bed. I wasn't frightened at that moment. I mean, and who knows if this is a dream state, but my recollection is that there was something, he was coming to say goodbye. I very much experienced the tactile sensation when he had a beard and he used to not give kisses but rub his beard against, you know, they were called wubs. So when he said, I want you to take care of Frankie, his wife, and say goodbye to your parents, and it came time for him to leave. And I knew at the time that the experience was going on that he had died, but I had absolutely no fear. I was so thrilled to see my, quote, Uncle Al, that when he came time to say goodbye, he said I had to go, and he leaned over to give me the wubs. And I remember so well the texture of the tweed jacket and the wiry bristles, right? And he turned and he walked out of the wall, which used to be a glass, I found out later, used to be a glass patio. But he walked out. As soon as he disappeared walking through the wall, then, shall we say, it hit the fan, like, yow! And I didn't even say anything to the widow. As fast as my fat little legs, I ran down the hall to my parents, and I was frightened silly. So those kind of, now whether that's wish fulfillment, you know, I'm sleeping in the widow's room, why, of course, you know, we won't discuss whether or not that was truly a psychic experience. But there were enough sort of things like that to tell me that, yeah, there's maybe a slight facility there, but with this heavy dose of fear, and Garrett saying, oh, goody, goody, it's coming, that was enough for me to shut down from that.
Yeah. Did Garrett have expectations about you being psychic? Or?
Yes, I think so, but I don't know whether that was an older woman with wish fulfillment, you know, because my mother was a disappointment, not at all that she wasn't a good daughter, but she wasn't drawn to all the trappings and, you know, remember I said about the organdy dresses and whatever, whereas I was drawn to that. So I think she saw, oh boy, okay, this one is a bit too practical, maybe this would be it. So I don't know whether she really saw something psychic, although as you say, a lot of people come in here and tell me that, but I have no way of knowing. So stay tuned, Carlos.
All right.
You'll be one of the first to know.
Yeah. Well, let me change the topic again and ask you, what are your thoughts about parapsychology today? How do you see the field, the strengths, weaknesses? What do you would like to see happening?
Well, the organized field of parapsychology should be commended because where it's come from, out of the seance room and through early psychical research, the degree of implementation of the scientific methodology is really to be commended. And I'm annoyed when people don't give us accord the field, all the trappings of a science, because we really do damn good science, as Larry LeShan said at the PA, and nobody really gives us credit for that. So that I find annoying. Having said that, I get impatient, personally impatient, because whereas we need the scientific method, I don't like to see the scientific method excluding the individual experiential person who produces something. So I also get impatient with what I tend to call the white coat parapsychologists that are just in the laboratory. And of course they have to be in the laboratory because they have to quantify, and I understand that on some level. But there seems to be a disconnect between the experimental parapsychologist and say, someone involved in field work. And it seems that there's no gray in between matter, and that you have to be ascribed to either one or the other. And I wish there would be more people such as yourself, such as Nancy Zingroni, who can work both sides of the aisle, as it were. So I think we have a viable science. There's no money. Parapsychology Foundation used to help with the money. We have no money. I mean, it's really frustrating, to say the least, that we have talented people, albeit not enough, because we lose them because they can't afford to work in the field. But there are talented people, and they just do not. And we would know if I could get people to fund the foundation again. We know who they are. So, it's not like giving money to some crackpot somewhere. We know where the centers are. So here is all the possibilities, potential, and yet money, and the lack thereof is really retarding our progress.
Yeah, that's true. I will agree with that. But let me ask you, in your involvement with parapsychology, you must have met a lot of people, fascinating personalities that have been involved in this field. Mm-hmm. Could you share with us some of the people that have impressed you in one way or the other?
Well, it's unfortunate that a lot of them I met at a very young age.
Yeah.
I mean, Garett died when I was 20. So the type of question, it kills me that I had access to people such as J.B. Rhine. Aldous Huxley was a extremely good friend of Garett's and a trustee once of Parapsychology Foundation. And Aldous Huxley, he's another one. I used to do my term papers off him, Brave New World, because then I could drop that I knew Aldous Huxley. But my biggest memory of this big, gentle giant was, again, I sound like a scaredy cat, but he had a glass eye. And, and he was a very tall gentleman. And, of course, I knew him in later years in the south of France attending one of Garett's conferences. And my mother, Mrs. Coly, admonished me, as most parents do, a young child, when you see somebody with an infirmity, don't make mention of the infirmity. And now I know why he wrote Eyeless and Gaza, because all I could do was fixate on the blue. Right. So isn't that a depth of intelligence, that my access to Aldous Huxley is bound up with his glass eye. But apart from that, another vignette and that I say, and I have a lot of warmth for Ian Stevenson, who I believe you worked with, yes. Because even at an early day, before I worked professionally at the foundation, I was pressed into service as Mrs. C was in her early life around Garett, and I happened to be at the offices. I was 13. I had gone to the orthodontist or something and had been dropped off at the office. Ian Stevenson had come up for an appointment with Eileen Garrett. right? She had funded his first trip to India, and they were going to have this working thing, and blah, blah, blah. And he had just published his first book. What was it? What was that called?
The 20 cases.
The 20
Suggestive
cases, yes. And he
reincarnation.
had the copy of the book to give to Garett.
Yeah.
And they were going to go to lunch. And Garett was known to go to some place called the Baroque, something very elegant. So here comes Dr. Stevenson with his trusted book to see Garett. Well, he sees Garett in the office for approximately 5-10 minutes, and then was told, "Oh, yes, Ian, well, I don't know what the excuse was, but Lisette will take you to lunch." Now, poor Dr. Stevenson, who got demoted from inner sanctum over there with his book, was shoveled off in the limo to this Baroque restaurant with a 13-year-old dingbat. And he proceeded to discuss his cases of reincarnation. And I proceeded, he tells me, to acquit myself particularly well. This was on-the-job training, you see, that Garett would throw us into these things. And if you can deal with that at the age of 13, running this foundation later on is almost a piece of cake. So I have lots of little vignettes, and the field has been very kind to me in that they saw me growing up. And I think there's a lot of residual goodwill for my mother, a lot of affection for Garett, translated into what, of course, Mrs. Coly did. They took sort of pity on the third one, and here I am now heading the thing. So the old-timers have been particularly generous to me.
Yeah. I know there is a lot of goodwill out there. I myself have seen it, in trying my work here. Part of the things I do is try to find articles for our journal or find authors for our publications. People are interested in working with us, and in interaction with people like that, we always find out that they're very friendly, they're happy to be asked by the foundation. There is a lot of good recollections there, and it's kind of easy to find people to help us, I find.
Yes, we could not do what we're doing on a shoestring here at the foundation had it not been for Garett and Coly's good work and the residual, as I mentioned, the valuable work and residual goodwill. Because as we seek to find authors for the International Journal of Parapsychology, people to do lectures, teach our courses. We just had Richard Broughton. Yes, we're the happy beneficiary of that goodwill.
Yeah, that says something very good about how people.
Of course, they're going to see us coming if we continue that, and I don't know how long, but for now we're doing okay.
Yes. Well, and then to conclude, I would like to ask you, what will be your wishes about the future direction of the foundation? What will you like to do in the future? What will you like to see the place moving into? Do you have any specific ideas about that?
Well, you know me well enough to know that I have a lot of ideas. Unfortunately, I have no money. So without making any bones about that, my primary concern is to have the organization continue. It's that desperate at this point. And a lot of our efforts now, again, is unfortunate in that we have been forced to turn to trying to create product and create an income stream to help us keep our programs going. On the flip side of that is we woke up, it became more clear, certainly during this time of fiscal emergency for the foundation, coupled with our 50th anniversary celebration. So there was a lot of looking back and thinking rededication and going forward. So there was a lot of thought to that, and it emerged, became apparent that really Parapsychology Foundation serves two constituencies. Always academia, the researchers, the scientists that we've tried to nurture and to continue to support, create dialogues, nurture the field. So academia has always been, perhaps to the fore, our primary concern. But Garett herself was very interested in the individual concerns, the person who experiences something. What does that do for mankind? So we realized that two tracks emerged, academia and the public at large. Yeah. So in this manner of being forced to create an income stream, the advantage of that is that I realized that we've always been in the business of being a clearinghouse for information, disseminating quality information about parapsychology, because I like to say that Mrs. Garett, Mrs. Coly spent all their time explaining what parapsychology is. Nobody knew what it was. Wonderful. I spent all my time explaining what it's not, because people have, thanks to our friends in the media, have cracked up ideas of what our phenomena is. They use all our buzzwords. They talk about poltergeists and remote viewing, auras, and they still don't know the real quality. They still don't know what we're doing and the true facts. Mm-hmm. So in creating an income stream and within our pamphlet series of introductory materials, and also going forth, the project very near to my heart is the Lyceum, that we've formalized a teaching arm within the foundation of Parapsychology Foundation's Lyceum, which has been formulated to advance quality education in parapsychology, and as you're one of the chief faculty members, you know full well what I'm saying. But again, as long as the foundation can keep going, the legacy, the lasting legacy of the three ladies and all this body of work is to get proper information out there. The library stands. Even if the building falls, the library will be donated somewhere as a repository for information. I like to personally think that the answers that we are searching for are all here. We just haven't figured out the correct combination. I know you appreciate above all else in the field the value of the written word and all the background information that would lead us to solving this question. So I think the lasting legacy is to draw on this body of work, educate, clear up confusions, and we've done our bit. Hopefully we'll continue to do our bit if the gods provide. But in any case, we should be proud of what we've done in the past, and certainly given the opportunity, we can continue doing just what we do and more.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Okay. Hi there, I'm Lisette Coly. I'm president of Parapsychology Foundation, so welcome to our YouTube channel. We have lots to look at, so please check out our videos. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.